Bob, thanks again for joining.
Sure.
I know we've talked about a couple different ideas and concepts as we were planning for this, and I think in thinking ahead, I think it's always relevant to talk about where we're at right now. So, one of the things you and I talked about is how are business leaders navigating the current environment, I won't even say the post effects of COVID, the continuation of COVID, the supply chain. Now we've got inflation issues. We've got a war in Ukraine. So, in your mind, how do business leaders navigate that while maintaining the business, the forecast, the goal?
There's a lot in that question, isn't there?
Yeah. I really threw a big softball out there. It was more of a beach ball.
Is the 3.5 hours for that, or is it?
Yeah. You know what? Everyone else is free to, no more speakers.
Well, first of all, Kip, thanks for the opportunity, and Matt, thanks to be here. It's really great when you can get a group of individuals with the diversity of experience and the entrepreneurial spirit that I felt in meeting with many of them yesterday and through dinner. So this is a great concept, and thanks for allowing me to be here, and thank you for supporting this initiative with this group. So Matt, let me start off by saying, I've been at this a long time. I started in 1971, so there's a lot of people here that weren't even born yet. And I have the benefit of that 50 plus years of seeing a lot of these various issues, maybe not identical, i.e. COVID, but I've seen a lot of those types of things. And I would say that, and I think most of you in this room would agree, I've never seen the degree of difficulty and complexity that CEOs have to face today. The breadth of constituents that you are being asked to respond to and try to appease is as broad as I've ever seen. And again, in my experience, when you try to do this, you probably aren't very successful. When you try to please everyone, you probably please no one, because you're always dancing on that tight wire. At Home Depot, if I ever took a position, I probably would offend 50% of my customers. So I tried to stay very focused on the business and the entrepreneurship in that business, and really being very market focused and customer centric. So you talked about Ukraine, and some of us lived through Vietnam War, and we saw the impact on the business then, and a number of Desert Storm, et cetera, et cetera. So what do we have going on there? We have, in addition to the loss of life, the impact on the standard of living, the quality of living there. We're sending a lot of money over there to support them in their fight for democracy and independence. And so that has a certain cloud over businesses in general that we have to face. You mentioned COVID, and again, we've lived through a lot of epidemics, if you will. But COVID, and you said that very accurately, is, when this broke out, we all got, locked down, and we were trying to figure out how to live through that from a business perspective. I think we probably created a majority of the problem ourselves as CEOs, because we were desperately trying to convince everybody that it would be business as usual. And we kept sending out these notes, gee, we haven't missed a beat, business is better, our cost performance is better. Well, yeah, if you aren't traveling, in one case, one of the big four was like $600 million in T&L expense that fell to the bottom line. So we kind of created this new environment where if you're a retailer and you have to be in the store, or you're in a factory, or you're doing something, you have to work. And then a lot of the other people didn't work, so there were the haves and the have-nots, if I can say it bluntly. And now we're faced with, we hear some of the big banks saying, you got to come back to work. And that's creating a lot of friction. We saw 10,000 people sign a petition that if they had to come back to work, that they were going to quit. And so I think that's created a lot of tension and a lot of angst within the business. And it has, this great resignation thing that we know so much about. But labor, I think, where's Marshall? I mean, we'll hear from the CEO guys magazine, that being able to attract, motivate, and retain a competent workforce is one of the biggest challenges we have today. And trying to get people to work and to this quiet resignation, oh my God, I can't believe we're as a country, we are in this position where people don't want to come to work, and there's this group of people that don't want to work. There's a group of people that want to get paid and not work, and then we have a smaller group that's willing to work and get paid, right? I mean, isn't that the three we face today? So it certainly is challenging a lot of us to get competent, dedicated workforce, to get quality products out on time. Supply chain. We had this great rotation because of either higher taxes, labor, cost of labor, where we rotated out of the U.S. into a more global supply chain, which is great when it works. But this is like dominoes. The first one that falls and the supply chain fell apart, right? Because of COVID, because of lockdowns, China got locked down, we got locked down. And trying to get that back in balance today, I deal with a lot of companies, both, privately held and public. And that is, again, right along with workforce, you have the supply chain issue. And trying to get that back in balance again, it's a little bit, if you have AFib in your heart, trying to get that thing back into rhythm is kind of like getting our supply chain back into rhythm. We're still, in some cases, a year on chips. And we'll talk about maybe that legislation in a moment. But supply chain, I think what you're going to see today, and we talked a little bit, Jason, right? We talked a little bit about the rotation back now, where we rotated out and we're rethinking globality and globalization and trying to bring things back to the U.S. because what we're saying is the certainty of supply chain is best met when it's under your control, and that you don't have the logistics issue. You're not paying $28,000, $30,000 for a container. A lot of major corporations bought their own container ships, which is great, but it's still floating out there outside the harbor to try to get it lined up to get it in there. So that's created, so we had the war, we got COVID, we got inflation, we got labor, and we got supply chain. And again, and then you got this whole issue of trying to appease a very broad, you got all these social unrest issues, if I can say it that way, that we're also trying to appease. So I think the CEO's job today, and the corporations, public or private, are as challenged as they've ever been. And it's going to take every bit of, this black swan, not the movie Black Swan, but the book. What can go wrong, and how can you prevent it from going wrong? How could you build more contingencies into your business today is the critical thinking that's going on. How do you think strategically, but then be able to focus operationally to be able to achieve those things? There's binders and binders of great thoughts, but the difference between that and the actual implementation of is really what differentiates your business, I think.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk a good bit. Joe Hayner's going to lead a panel on supply chain, and so as I was listening to you, and I think I completely agree with the workforce, and I know Paula Wallace from SCAD and many others in the we were talking about youth and how we feel like there was a year lost maybe as we were sitting there with breakfast, and so some of this reshoring, nearshoring conflict we're all working through also runs into a workforce issue, not just now, but in the future. And so I think navigating those things with a forward vision isn't easy for anyone, and certainly one that then you put that in just a long list of all those issues. They're compounding. You
said something, and there's a fine line between onshoring and reshoring, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we were all moving towards onshoring. And then we see new legislation about 15% minimum tax, and we see a number of other issues out there. At least a lot of the companies I'm talking to aren't quite as focused on onshoring as they are reshoring, looking to Vietnam and some of the other areas over there to maintain a global competitiveness. I mean, I never had an outsourcing strategy. When I was running GE Power Systems, which was a global business, my strategy was to be globally competitive, not to outsource, but I needed to have a global footprint to serve the customers locally, but also to take advantage, quite honestly, of some lower taxes and some other government regulations that made me uncompetitive to compete with ABB, Siemens, and so forth. So I think we have to face this, with a realistic view. If you want to be globally competitive and you want to globalize your business, it's going to require you to have some local footprint.
Mm-hmm. And so, and you said something a minute ago, you briefly mentioned chips, and so as we're talking about this shift from a supply chain perspective, I think the holistic question I have is, so we've talked about how you navigate the challenges that are external challenges. I think we could argue policy, public policy becomes another external factor to consider. So, I think we talked about chips, but as an act, but do you think the public policy will help motivate that quicker, or do you think it's noise, or do you think it's well-founded, I guess?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Well, there's a couple of points about chips, and I brought a sheet because I want to make sure I quoted these numbers correctly, because there's a lot of them in there. But when somebody mentions IRA, what do you think of? Individual retirement account, right? That's what I always thought about. Well, there's this new nomenclature, right? It's the inflation adjustment, right? So let's just think about that for a moment. If you think about the CHIPS program, and one could say it's about time, we get that localized as opposed to depending upon, a particular country offshore near China. And so what are we going to spend on that? I guess we're going to spend $39 billion for construction of semi-plants and $11 billion for semi-R&D spread over 22 to 26. So that's one part of the Inflation Reduction Act, not individual retirement account. And then beyond that, we're going to allocate $392 billion for energy and climate. And then there's another $98 billion for healthcare. Then the offsets to that, of course, are going to be healthcare savings of $322 billion and increased revenue from this minimum tax of 15%. The IRS enforcement, they're adding, 80-some thousand agents. And I know one of them said they're going to target you, Matt, on it.
Yeah, perfect. Let me make a note of that.
And then those that were using stock buyback to get that 1 or 2 pennies earning per quarter to meet the street's expectation, I guess the penalty for doing that is a 1% potential tax on buyback. And so it'll be interesting to see. Supposedly this is going to help inflation and reduce the debt, right, Matt? So time will tell. Maybe with the best of intentions. What's that old saying? If it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, quacks like it's probably a duck. We'll see if this is a duck or not, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think I think it just adds to another layer of, do you let things external impact the business plan? And I think as we were talking, that's part of it. Is how. And I know Jason Hodel will speak later. And I know when I first heard him speak, it was about know your market, know your niche, and just keep a laser focus on that. And so I think for everybody here, I'd imagine there's also an aspect of each, and I know we've got a lot of diverse businesses here, so we've got a lot of different things that are being done in this room, but I'd imagine there's a constant innovation aspect to it too. So it's control what you can control concept. And so I know Dom was joking at breakfast that I was trying to get some dirt on you last night, but
that's easy.
I really wasn't, but I will say, one of the first things he said is, he goes, I think one of the things that most people don't know about Bob is how innovative he was and is, and how he approaches, not just the operations of the business, but I mean, just curious, as you're thinking about the things you can control, I mean, how high do you rank the innovation or constant innovation in the business world?
For me, innovation, I always use the term, you either innovate or you evaporate. And if the rate of change internal isn't greater than external, you're backing up. And so I've always been a big proponent, a big sponsor of change should be your only constant, right? And so the way I've worked over the years with my management team is I truly believe that every individual on that team has an accountability. And I think today there's a lot of people that, want to have big titles, right? And so they want responsibility, right? They want authority. And so it's like an inverse pyramid is what I see today. So authority, responsibility, accountability. And there's a very small number of people, Matt, that really want the accountability that goes with the prestige of, maybe the compensation of accountability. So I always, one of the guys reporting to me at Home Depot, responsible for growth of the business, along with Dom, had to deliver $1 billion of profitable, accretive businesses every year, right? So when we went around the room, it wasn't just, pounding on the operational guy or the merchandising guy, but everybody, including our chief human resource officer, all had a financial target to achieve, so the sum of the total got us 20% growth each year, year over year for 5 years. So I don't know, you always have to have a childlike curiosity, right? I mean, I like to hire people that have energy, the ability to energize. They have an entrepreneurial spirit, like a childlike curiosity. And then, of course, they got to execute. So those are the kind of the E's I like to focus on.
As you were talking, the word curiosity came to mind. I mean, to be driving and notice what isn't there is, you could label that curiosity, innovative, all those things. I mean, I think that's what we're all looking for, right? Is not just the next thing. It's, okay, even if it's the thing I have now, how do I make it better? How do I get it into more people's hands? I think that's...
Yeah. You just can never be satisfied. There's no room in business today for status quo. There's 3 more E's that have served me well through my entire career. Enhance the core, extend the business, and expand the market.
Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you.